The California sun was doing what it does best on that particular Saturday afternoon, painting everything in warm golden light that made the ocean sparkle like someone had scattered a million diamonds across the water. Venice Beach was packed with the usual weekend crowd. Tourists snapping photos, street performers showing off their skills, the smell of hot dogs and cotton candy mixing with the salty ocean breeze. It was the kind of day that made you happy to be alive. Near the edge of the boardwalk, right next to an old ice cream shop that had been there since the 70s, a young boy sat alone on a wooden bench. He couldn't have been more than 12 years old, with a backpack at his feet and his sneakers barely touching the ground when he sat all the way back. The kid was completely focused on something in his hands, counting and recounting with the kind of careful attention that told you whatever he was doing really mattered to him. In his small hands were crumpled dollar bills, some so worn they looked like they might fall apart if you breathed on them too hard. Mixed in were quarters, dimes, nickels, and even a few pennies. He'd smooth out each bill carefully on his knee, stack them neatly, then count the coins, moving them from one palm to the other. Then he'd do it all over again, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Anyone watching closely might have noticed the way his face lit up each time he finished counting. That smile that starts small and then spreads until it takes over your whole face. The kind of smile that comes from working really hard for something and finally getting there. His worn t-shirt had a faded superhero logo on it, and his jeans had a patch on one knee. But none of that seemed to matter to him right then. He was lost in his own little world of dreams and dollar bills. What the boy didn't know was that someone had been watching him for the past few minutes. Not in a creepy way, but with the kind of casual awareness you develop when you spend a lot of time around people. About 20 feet away, near a magazine stand covered with colorful tabloids and surf magazines, stood a man who seemed almost deliberately unremarkable. He wore a plain gray hoodie despite the warm weather, with the hood down. A baseball cap sat low on his head and dark sunglasses covered half his face. The kind of outfit that basically screamed, "Please don't notice me." The thing was, if you looked past the disguise, there was something about this guy that didn't quite add up. His shoulders were broader than the average person's, the kind of build you don't get from just going to the gym a couple times a week. His arms, visible where the hoodie sleeves were pushed up, showed the kind of muscle definition that spoke of years of serious training. But his posture was relaxed, casual, as he flipped through a surfing magazine without really reading it. He'd been on the boardwalk for about an hour now, just enjoying being nobody special for a change. In his world, that was a rare gift. Most days involved cameras, crowds, scheduled appearances, people wanting autographs or photos. But today, with his simple disguise, he was just another face in the crowd. He could grab a coffee, watch the street performers, feel the ocean breeze, and remember what it was like to be a regular person doing regular things. The man glanced over at the boy again and smiled slightly under his sunglasses. There was something about the kid's concentration, that pure joy over whatever he was counting, that reminded him of himself at that age. Back when everything seemed possible if you just worked hard enough for it. Before life got complicated, the boardwalk continued to buzz with activity around them. A group of teenagers rolled by on skateboards, their wheels making that distinctive rumbling sound on the concrete. A street musician played guitar nearby, his case open for tips, singing something about California dreaming. Families walked past with ice cream cones already melting in the sun. An old man fed the seagulls despite the signs telling him not to. It was just another perfect beach day, the kind of scene that postcards are made of. The boy finished counting his money again, and this time, his smile was so big it could have powered the whole boardwalk. He carefully folded the bills and tucked them into his front pocket, then poured the coins into a small Ziploc bag that he sealed and put in his other pocket. He was being extra careful, making sure everything was secure. Whatever he was planning to buy, he'd worked hard for it, and he wasn't taking any chances. He stood up from the bench, grabbed his backpack, and slung it over one shoulder. For a moment, he just stood there looking around the boardwalk with this expression of pure happiness, like he was taking it all in, wanting to remember this exact moment, the ocean, the sun, the sounds, the feeling of accomplishment that came with saving up for something all by yourself. The man at the magazine stand watched the boy start to walk away and felt a small pang of something he couldn't quite name. Nostalgia, maybe, or just that bittersweet feeling you get when you see someone young and hopeful, before the world has had a chance to knock them around a bit. He hoped the kid would hold on to that feeling, that pride in earning something yourself. It was a good lesson to learn young. He was about to go back to pretending to read his magazine when a different sound cut through the pleasant beach noise. It started as a low rumble in the distance, then grew louder and more aggressive. The distinctive roar of motorcycle engines, but not the friendly weekend rider kind. These sounded angry, like they were trying to announce themselves, demanding attention and space. 3 motorcycles came into view, weaving through the boardwalk traffic with less care than they should have had. People had to move quickly out of their way. The bikes were big, loud chrome gleaming in the sunlight, and the riders matched their machines in terms of trying to look intimidating. Leather vests with patches, chains, boots that looked like they could kick through a wall. The kind of guys who spent a lot of energy making sure everyone knew they were tough. The lead rider, a big guy with a messy beard and arms covered in faded tattoos, seemed to be scanning the boardwalk as he rode. His 2 friends followed close behind, looking like they were waiting for his signal, ready to follow whatever lead he set. They weren't riding fast, more like prowling, looking for something or someone to focus their attention on. The man in the hoodie felt his relaxed mood shift slightly. He'd seen guys like this before in lots of different contexts. Usually they were all bark and no bite, getting their kicks from intimidating people who couldn't fight back. Bullies with motorcycles instead of a playground to work with. He didn't stop watching his magazine, but his attention was definitely elsewhere now. The motorcycles slowed down as they approached the bench where the boy had been sitting. The kid was about 15 feet away now, walking toward the shops with that bounce in his step that comes from having money in your pocket and plans in your head. He was completely oblivious to the 3 riders who had just pulled up to the curb behind him. The lead rider killed his engine. The sudden absence of that aggressive rumble was almost as loud as the noise itself had been. His 2 friends followed suit, and the 3 of them sat there on their bikes for a moment, like they were in some kind of movie, waiting for the dramatic effect to sink in. A few people on the boardwalk glanced over nervously, then quickly looked away. Nobody wanted trouble on a nice Saturday afternoon. The man at the magazine stand very slowly closed the magazine he'd been holding. His jaw tightened just slightly, a small movement that probably nobody noticed. His whole posture changed, though he hadn't actually moved. It was like he'd gone from relaxed vacation mode to something else entirely, something alert and ready. Years of training had taught him to read situations quickly, and his instincts were telling him that what was about to happen wasn't going to be good. The lead biker swung his leg over his motorcycle and stood up, stretching like he had all the time in the world. He was a big guy, probably used to his size being enough to make people back down. His vest had patches that probably meant something in his world, and his sunglasses reflected the afternoon light. He said something to his buddies that made them laugh, then started walking in the direction the boy had gone. The boy had stopped at a shop window looking at something on display. He was completely unaware of the 3 men walking up behind him, their boots heavy on the boardwalk. The crowd seemed to sense that something was off, people giving the bikers a wide berth, conversations dropping to whispers. At the magazine stand, the man in the hoodie set down his magazine completely. He adjusted his sunglasses slightly and took a small step to his left, giving himself a clearer view of what was developing. His hands, which had been casually flipping through pages a moment ago, now hung loose at his sides. "Ready?" The lead biker called out something, his voice loud and deliberately aggressive. The boy turned around, and even from a distance you could see his expression change from happy to confused to worried in the span of about 2 seconds. The 3 men formed a loose semicircle around him, cutting off his easy escape routes. The body language was clear even if you couldn't hear what was being said. This wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. The afternoon sun continued to shine, the ocean kept sparkling, the seagulls still called out overhead. But that perfect beach day feeling had shifted into something else entirely. Something was about to happen, and most of the people on the boardwalk could feel it. Some were already walking away faster, not wanting to get involved. Others were reaching for their phones, that modern instinct to record everything. And near the magazine stand, a man who had come to the beach just to enjoy a quiet afternoon, to be nobody special for a few hours, felt that familiar pull of responsibility. That thing inside him that had never let him walk away when someone needed help, no matter how much easier it would be to just mind his own business and keep his anonymity intact. The boy took a small step backward, and the lead biker took 2 steps forward. Whatever was about to unfold, it was happening right now. in the bright California sunshine, with dozens of witnesses who would either do something or do nothing. The moment hung there balanced on a knife's edge, and the only question was which way it would fall. The lead biker stood there with his arms crossed, looking down at the young boy like he was examining something unpleasant he'd found on the bottom of his boot. His two friends flanked him on either side, and all three of them had these ugly smirks on their faces. The kind of expressions that told you they were enjoying this, getting some kind of sick pleasure from making a kid uncomfortable. The boy clutched his backpack straps tighter, his knuckles going a shade lighter. He wasn't crying yet, but you could see the fear starting to creep into his eyes. That horrible realization kids get when they understand that adults don't always play by the rules of fairness they've been taught. Sometimes adults are just mean for no good reason at all. You deaf kid, I asked you a question. The bearded biker leaned forward slightly, invading the boy's personal space in that way bullies do when they want to make you feel small. What are you doing hanging around here counting money like some kind of street beggar? This is a nice beach. We don't need your type bringing down the property values. Your type. Those two words hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone within earshot knew exactly what he meant, even if he hadn't said it directly. The racial undertone was clear as day, and it made the whole situation feel even more disgusting. This wasn't just some random bully picking on a kid. This had an extra layer of hatred baked right into it. The boy's voice came out smaller than he probably wanted it to. I wasn't begging. I was just counting my money. I've been saving up for new shoes. I didn't do anything wrong. One of the other bikers, a skinny guy with a snake tattoo winding up his neck, laughed like this was the funniest thing he'd heard all day. Saving up? Yeah, right. More like you lifted that cash from someone's purse when they weren't looking. That's what you people do, isn't it? Always got your hands in someone else's pocket. The third biker, shorter but stockier than the others, nodded along like this was all perfectly reasonable logic. My cousin got robbed by some punk kid last month. Looked just like you now that I think about it. Maybe we should call the cops, let them sort this out, see if any of that money matches what got stolen. The boy's eyes went wide with panic. I didn't steal anything. I worked for this money. I mowed lawns and washed cars and helped my neighbor carry groceries. Every dollar is mine. I earned it fair. His voice cracked on that last word, and you could hear both the fear and the frustration fighting for control. He was trying so hard to stay calm, to be brave, but he was just a kid facing down three grown men who clearly had nothing but bad intentions. The lead biker tilted his head, pretending to think this over. Oh, you worked for it? Doing what exactly? I find it real hard to believe anyone would pay good money for whatever it is you think you do. He turned to his friends. You guys believe this? Kid's trying to tell us he's some kind of entrepreneur. They all laughed, and it was the kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl. Not because it was loud, but because it was so casual. Like making a child miserable was just another way to pass the time on a Saturday afternoon. Like this kid's feelings, his dignity, his hard work meant absolutely nothing to them. More people were starting to notice now. The crowd that had been flowing naturally along the boardwalk was beginning to slow down, create distance, form that horrible human circle that happens when something bad is going down and everyone wants to watch, but nobody wants to help. Phones were coming out of pockets, not to call for help but to record, because that's what we do now. We document everything and hope someone else will step in. An older woman with shopping bags stopped about 20 feet away, her hand over her mouth. You could see she wanted to do something, say something, but the fear held her in place. She was maybe 5'0" and 70 years old. What was she going to do against three guys who probably outweighed her by 150 pounds each? So she just stood there looking horrified and helpless. A young couple hurried past on the other side, the girlfriend tugging on her boyfriend's arm when he slowed down to look. Don't get involved. You could hear her whisper urgently. It's not our problem. And just like that, they disappeared into the crowd, choosing safety over justice. You couldn't really blame them, but it didn't make it any less sad. The boy took another step back, but he bumped into a trash can and had nowhere else to go. He was trapped and he knew it. His breathing was getting faster, that panic starting to set in. His hand moved to his pocket, probably checking to make sure his money was still there. And that simple gesture caught the lead biker's attention like a shark spotting blood in the water. Oh, what's this? The bearded man's voice took on a dangerous edge of mock curiosity. You getting protective of that cash? Worried we might take what's rightfully ours? Because let me tell you something, kid. People like you don't belong on this beach. You want to buy fancy new shoes? Go back to wherever you came from and buy them there. This place isn't for you." The words were getting uglier, more explicitly hateful. A few people in the growing crowd gasped or shook their heads, but still nobody moved. The man at the magazine stand, still partially hidden by his baseball cap and sunglasses, had gone completely still. If you looked closely, you'd see his jaw was clenched so tight a muscle was jumping in his cheek. His hands, hanging loose at his sides, had curled into fists and then deliberately uncurled, like he was physically restraining himself from doing what every instinct was telling him to do. The bearded biker reached out suddenly and grabbed the boy's shoulder. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make it clear who was in control here. "How about you empty those pockets? Let us see this money you supposedly earned. Prove to us it's yours." That's when the boy did something that surprised everyone, including probably himself. Instead of cowering or crying or giving in, he straightened his spine, looked the biker right in the face, and said in a voice that shook but didn't break, "No, it's my money. I earned it and you can't have it. You're just being mean because you're a bully and you think you can get away with it because I'm a kid." For a second, everyone held their breath. The bearded man's face went from mocking to genuinely angry in the time it takes to blink. Nobody talked back to him, especially not some kid he'd decided to target. His grip on the boy's shoulder tightened, and his other hand came up like he was going to poke the kid in the chest or worse. "You got a smart mouth, you know that? Maybe someone needs to teach you some respect. Show you what happens when you don't know your place." That was it. That was the line that couldn't be uncrossed. The threat was explicit now, hanging in the air like thunder before lightning. The crowd seemed to collectively lean back, people already pulling out their phones to call 911, finally realizing this had gone from ugly to potentially dangerous. But before the bearded biker could do whatever he was planning, before his finger could jab into the boy's chest or his hand could do anything worse, a voice cut through the tension like a hot knife through butter. "I think that's far enough." The voice was calm. That was the scariest thing about it, actually. It wasn't loud or aggressive or trying to compete with the biker's energy. It was just calm, steady, and carried so much authority that it made everyone stop and turn to look. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd never had to yell to make people listen, because people just naturally did. The bearded biker's head whipped around, his hand still on the boy's shoulder. His expression was annoyed, like a dog that had been interrupted while playing with something it caught. "Who the hell are you supposed to be? This ain't your business, so keep walking." The man in the gray hoodie was standing about 10 feet away now, though nobody had really seen him walk over. It was like he'd just materialized there, blocking the path between the bikers and any escape route they might want. He still had his baseball cap on, still wore those dark sunglasses, but something about his posture had changed completely. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was taking up space, making himself known, and even with half his face covered, there was something undeniably powerful about his presence. "Actually, I'm making it my business." The man's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "Because what I'm watching here is 3 grown men harassing a child, and where I come from, that's the kind of thing that doesn't fly." One of the other bikers, the one with the snake tattoo, stepped forward like he was going to get tough. "Listen, buddy, you really don't want to get involved in this. We're just having a conversation with the kid here. Nothing to do with you, so why don't you go back to your magazine and mind your own business before you get hurt?" The man in the hoodie didn't move, didn't step back, didn't flinch, didn't show even a flicker of concern. A conversation? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks more like 3 bullies trying to intimidate a 12-year-old boy because they've got nothing better to do with their afternoon. That about sum it up? The bearded leader finally let go of the boy's shoulder and turned to face this new problem fully. He looked the man up and down, trying to size him up, calculate if this was worth the trouble. The stranger was tall, that much was obvious. Broad across the shoulders in a way that even the loose hoodie couldn't hide. But more than that, there was something about the way he stood, the way he held himself, that suggested this wasn't someone who scared easily. You know what? The bearded biker tried a different approach, going for threatening instead of dismissive. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away. You don't know who you're messing with here. We're not the kind of people you want trouble with." Behind the sunglasses, you couldn't see the man's eyes, but somehow you could feel them, cold assessing, completely unimpressed. "Is that right? Well, here's the thing. I'm not particularly worried about what kind of people you are, because I know exactly what kind of people pick on kids half their size. And spoiler alert, They're not as tough as they think they are. The crowd was getting bigger now, sensing that this confrontation had shifted into something different. Some people were still recording, but others were moving closer, emboldened by the presence of someone willing to stand up. The old lady with the shopping bags had a small smile on her face now, hope flickering where fear had been moments before. The boy, still pressed against the trash can, was looking at his unexpected defender with an expression of pure disbelief, mixed with desperate hope. Like he couldn't quite believe this was real, that someone had actually stepped in to help him. His eyes were shining with tears he'd been holding back, but he wasn't crying. Not yet. He was watching, waiting, hoping this was going to end with him getting to walk away with his money and his dignity intact. The stocky biker cracked his knuckles, trying to look intimidating. "Last warning, hero. Walk away now or we're gonna have a problem." The man in the hoodie crossed his arms over his chest, a gesture that somehow managed to look both casual and dangerous at the same time. "Oh, we already have a problem. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize you're on the wrong side of it." The bearded biker took a step closer to the man in the hoodie, getting right up in his personal space the way bullies do when they're trying to make someone back down. "You think you're some kind of tough guy? You think just because you got some muscles under that sweatshirt that you can come here and tell us what to do?" The man didn't move, didn't step back, didn't shift his weight, didn't give an inch. "I think I'm someone who's tired of watching grown men act like children. Worse than children, actually. Most kids know better than this." Something about that comment really got under the biker's skin. His face flushed red and you could see a vein starting to pulse in his forehead. "You don't know anything about me, about us. You come rolling in here with your self-righteous attitude, thinking you're gonna save the day. This is real life, not some movie. Heroes get hurt in real life." The man tilted his head slightly. "Is that a threat? Because if you're threatening me, I should probably let you know that's not going to go the way you think it will." The biker with the snake tattoo moved to flank the man from the side, trying to create a pincer situation. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you, genius. You really think the odds are in your favor here?" Before the man could respond, someone in the crowd shouted, "Leave him alone! 3 against 1 isn't fair." A few other voices joined in, people getting braver now that someone had broken the silence. The mob mentality was starting to shift and you could feel it in the air. What had been passive observation was turning into active disapproval. The bearded biker glanced around and seemed to realize that public opinion was turning against him. But instead of backing down like a smart person would, his pride kicked in and made him double down. "You all need to mind your own business. This is between us and these 2. "Actually," the man in the hoodie said, his voice cutting through the crowd noise like a sharp blade, "I think everyone here has made it their business. See, that's the thing about being a bully in public. Eventually, people get tired of watching it happen." The stocky biker suddenly reached out and shoved the man in the chest, trying to provoke a reaction. It was a hard shove, the kind that would have sent most people stumbling backward a few steps. But the man in the hoodie barely moved. He rocked back maybe an inch, absorbed the impact, and then just stood there looking at the biker like he'd been tapped by a feather. The crowd gasped. A few people shouted. The boy, still pressed against the trash can, had his hand over his mouth, terrified of what might happen next. The man looked down at the hand that had just shoved him, then back up at the stocky biker. "That was a mistake." His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but somehow that made it more threatening than if he'd yelled. The bearded leader seemed to realize things were spiraling out of control. He'd wanted to intimidate a kid and feel tough, not get into an actual confrontation with someone who clearly wasn't scared of them. "Look, man, we don't want any real trouble here. Just walk away and we'll forget this whole thing happened." "Oh, now you don't want trouble?" The man's voice carried a hint of mockery. 5 minutes ago you were perfectly happy to terrorize a 12-year-old. But now that someone your own size is standing here, suddenly you're looking for an exit." The biker tried to save face. "We were just messing around with the kid. Just some jokes, that's all. No harm intended." The man turned slightly to look at the boy who was wiping tears from his eyes with the back of his hand. "Does he look like he thought it was funny? Do any of these people look like they were laughing at your jokes?" The bearded biker's jaw clenched. He was trapped now between his pride and his common sense, and everyone was watching to see which one would win. His 2 friends were looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot, probably wishing they'd just stayed home today. That's when the man in the hoodie did something unexpected. He reached up and slowly removed his sunglasses. folding them carefully and hooking them on the neck of his shirt. Even with the baseball cap still shadowing part of his face, more was visible now. Strong jaw, intense eyes that seemed to look right through you. A face that carried both strength and something else. Something familiar. A woman in the crowd let out a small gasp. Then another person did a double take. Someone whispered urgently to their friend. And suddenly phones that had been recording the confrontation were being lowered as people stared, trying to process what they were seeing. The bearded biker noticed the reaction and frowned, confused. What are you all looking at?" The man reached up and removed his baseball cap, running a hand over his distinctive crew cut. The afternoon sun hit his face fully now, and there was no mistaking who he was. The recognition rippled through the crowd like an electric current, people's mouths literally falling open. "Oh my God," someone said loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's John Cena." The name hit the three bikers like a physical blow. The stocky one actually took a step backward. The guy with the snake tattoo looked like he wanted the boardwalk to open up and swallow him whole. And the bearded leader just stood there, his expression cycling through disbelief, recognition, and then slowly settling into something that looked a lot like fear mixed with humiliation. John Cena, the wrestler, actor, and one of the most recognizable celebrities in the world, was standing on Venice Beach in a hoodie, having just confronted them for bullying a child. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Here was a man famous for his work with children's charities, for granting more Make-A-Wish requests than anyone else in history, for literally dedicating his life to helping kids, and these three had decided to harass a child right in front of him. "So," John said, his voice still calm but now carrying the weight of his identity behind it, "we were talking about apologies, I believe, about how you three grown men were going to make this right with this young man here." The crowd was getting bigger by the second now. Word was spreading fast. People were running over from other parts of the boardwalk, wanting to see if it was really him. Phones were back up, but now they were recording something different. Not just a confrontation, but a moment that was about to go viral. The kind of thing that would be all over social media in minutes. The bearded biker tried to gather what was left of his dignity. "Look, Mr. Cena, we didn't know, we were just—" John cut him off. "You didn't know what? You didn't know someone might be watching? You didn't know that actions have consequences? Or you didn't know that it's wrong to racially harass a child regardless of who's around to see it?" The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody in that crowd was breathing. The biker opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish out of water. He had no good answer because there wasn't one. John took a step toward the boy who was now openly crying but trying hard to stop. He knelt down so he was at eye level with him, his back deliberately turned to the three bikers. It was a gesture of complete dismissal, like they weren't even worth his attention anymore. All that mattered now was the kid. "Hey," John said softly, his whole demeanor changing from confrontational to gentle. "You okay? Did they hurt you?" The boy shook his head, his voice coming out small and shaky. "No, sir. They just scared me. And they were saying mean things. Really mean things." He paused, swallowing hard. "I did earn this money. I promise I did. I'm not a thief." John's expression softened even more. "I know you're not. I could see that from across the boardwalk. I watched you counting your money, saw how careful you were with it, how proud you looked. That's the face of someone who worked hard for something, not someone who stole it." "I've been saving for 3 months," the boy continued, the words tumbling out now like a dam had broken. "I wanted these shoes that all the other kids have. But my mom works really hard and I didn't want to ask her because I know money is tight. So I did yard work and washed cars and helped Mr. Peterson down the street carry his groceries every week. I earned every single dollar." John smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. "That's one of the best things I've heard in a long time. You know why? Because you learned something that a lot of people never learn. You learned that the things you work for yourself mean more than the things that just get handed to you. Your mom must be really proud of you." The boy wiped his eyes again, managing a small smile. "She doesn't know yet. I was going to surprise her with the shoes." "Well, we're definitely going to make sure you get those shoes," John said. He stood back up and turned to face the three bikers, and just like that, the gentleness was gone, replaced by that hard edge again. "But first, these gentlemen have something they need to say to you." The three bikers looked at each other, then at John, then at the growing crowd of people recording every second of this. The bearded one cleared his throat. "Kid, we're sorry. That was out of line. John shook his head. That's not good enough. Not even close. You want to try again? This time look at him. Say his name if you know it, and tell him specifically what you're apologizing for. The biker looked like he wanted to argue, but one glance at John's face told him that wasn't going to work. He turned to the boy and for the first time, seemed to actually see him as a person and not just a target. I don't know your name. The boy's voice was quiet. It's Dante. Dante, the biker repeated, and you could hear something in his voice starting to crack. Maybe it was genuine shame, or maybe it was just embarrassment at being called out in front of hundreds of people, but either way, it was something. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I said about you, about where you came from, about your money. It was racist and it was wrong. You didn't deserve any of that. John looked at the other two. You both got something to add. The guy with the snake tattoo nodded quickly. Yeah, man, Dante, I'm sorry too. That was really messed up what we did. The stocky one looked genuinely sick to his stomach. I'm sorry, kid, seriously, that's not who I want to be. The crowd started clapping, slow at first, then building. It wasn't applause for the bikers, but for Dante, for his courage in standing up to them, for having to endure something no kid should ever have to go through. John put a hand on Dante's shoulder. You showed a lot of courage back there, standing up for yourself even when you were scared. That's real strength, not the fake tough guy act these three were putting on, but actual strength of character. Dante looked up at him with something close to hero worship in his eyes. Thank you for helping me. I didn't think anyone was going to. That's something we need to fix, John said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. We all need to do better at standing up when we see something wrong happening. We can't just record it and hope someone else steps in. A few people in the crowd looked down at their phones. The message received loud and clear. John turned back to the three bikers, who were still standing there looking like they wished they could disappear into thin air. The bearded one was staring at his boots, his two friends shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. The whole tough guy act had crumbled completely, replaced by the awkward shame of adults who'd been caught doing something they knew was wrong. Here's what's going to happen now, John said, his voice carrying that calm authority that made everyone listen. You three are going to walk back to your motorcycles, get on them, and leave. And before you go, you're going to think real hard about what happened here today. Not because you got caught, not because I showed up, but because somewhere along the way you forgot that treating people with basic human decency isn't optional. The bearded biker nodded quickly, eager to accept any exit that didn't make this worse. Yeah, absolutely, we'll go. Right now. I'm not finished, John said, and the biker froze. I want you to understand something. That boy you were harassing, he's been working for 3 months to save up for a pair of shoes. 3 months of hard work, of doing things right, of not asking for handouts. At 12 years old, he's already learned the value of earning what you get. What have you three learned? How to gang up on kids. How to make yourselves feel big by making someone else feel small. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife. Hundreds of people were watching now, the crowd having swelled to probably close to 300 or 400 curious onlookers. Every single one of them had their attention locked on this moment. This lesson being delivered in real time on a sunny beach afternoon. The stocky biker surprised everyone by speaking up, his voice rough with emotion. You're right. You're completely right. I got a nephew about his age, and if someone did this to him, I'd lose my mind. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking, I guess. That's the problem, John said. You weren't thinking. You just went along with it because it seemed like fun. Or maybe because you were bored, or maybe because deep down you've got some ugly stuff you haven't dealt with. But that's on you to fix, not on kids like Dante to suffer through. The biker with the snake tattoo looked like he was going to be sick. I swear, man, I'm not usually like this. I don't know why I went along with it. That's not me. John studied him for a moment. Maybe it's not who you want to be. But today it was exactly who you were. The question is what you're going to do about that. Are you going to go home and forget this happened? Tell yourself it wasn't that bad? Or are you going to actually look in the mirror and do the work to be better? None of them had an answer to that. What could they say? John had just held up a mirror to show them exactly who they'd been in that moment. And it wasn't pretty. The bearded biker finally looked up, meeting John's eyes for the first time. We'll do better. I'll do better. I promise. Don't promise me, John said, gesturing to Dante. Promise him. He's the one you hurt today. The three bikers turned to look at Dante, who was still standing close to John like he was using him as a shield. The boy looked so small next to these grown men. And the contrast made what they'd done seem even worse. How brave do you have to be to pick on someone who barely comes up to your chest? The bearded biker took a breath. Dante, I promise you I'm going to be better than this. What we did to you today was wrong on every level, and I'm genuinely sorry. Not just because we got caught, but because you deserved better. Every kid deserves better. Dante nodded slowly, not quite ready to accept it fully, but understanding that this was as close to real remorse as he was going to get. Okay. John looked at the three men. You can go now. And if I ever hear about you doing something like this again, to anyone, we're going to have a much longer and much less pleasant conversation. Are we clear? They all nodded vigorously, mumbling variations of yes sir and absolutely and won't happen again. Then they practically scurried back to their motorcycles, started them up with significantly less aggressive fanfare than when they'd arrived, and rode off down the boardwalk at a reasonable speed. Their exit was about as far from intimidating as you could get. They looked exactly like what they were, bullies who'd been called out and had nothing left to hide behind. As the sound of their motorcycles faded into the distance, the crowd erupted into applause. Real, genuine, enthusiastic applause. People were cheering, some were crying, many were shouting words of support. The older woman with the shopping bags was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. A group of teenagers were chanting John Cena, like they were at a wrestling match. The whole atmosphere had shifted from tense and ugly to something that felt almost celebratory. John raised his hands, trying to quiet everyone down. Hey, hold on. I appreciate it, but I'm not the hero here. Dante is. He's the one who stood his ground and didn't let them break his spirit. He's the one who kept his dignity even when they were trying to take it from him. The crowd shifted their applause to Dante, who looked absolutely overwhelmed. His eyes were wide, his mouth hanging open slightly, like he couldn't quite process what was happening. 2 minutes ago he'd been terrified and humiliated, and now hundreds of strangers were clapping for him while John Cena called him a hero. It was a lot for a 12-year-old to take in. John knelt down again, getting back on Dante's level. You okay? I know that was a lot. Dante nodded, still looking dazed. That was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. I thought they were going to take my money or hurt me or call the police and lie about me doing something wrong. I was so scared. But you didn't let that fear make you give up, John pointed out. You told them no. You stood up for yourself even when you were terrified. That's courage, Dante. Real courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. My mom always says that, Dante said quietly. She says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you don't let the scared feeling stop you. John smiled. Your mom sounds like a smart lady. She raised a good kid. Dante's face lit up at that, pride pushing past the leftover fear and stress. She's the best. She works at the hospital and sometimes she has to work double shifts, but she always makes sure I have what I need. That's why I didn't want to ask her for the shoes. She already does so much. Something in John's expression shifted, got a little softer around the edges. How much do you have saved up? If you don't mind me asking. Dante pulled out the Ziploc bag of coins and the folded bills from his pockets. I have $83.47. The shoes I want cost $79.99, so I have enough plus a little extra for tax. John looked at the money, then back at Dante's face, and you could see him making a decision. What size shoe do you wear? Size 7, Dante answered, confused about where this was going. And what kind of shoes were you planning to get? Dante's face got animated, the excitement of talking about something he'd been dreaming about for months pushing away the last of his fear. They're these blue and white sneakers that all the kids at school have. They're really cool, and they're good for playing basketball at recess. I've been thinking about them every single day while I was saving up. John stood up and put his hand on Dante's shoulder. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to go get you those shoes you've been working so hard for. Then we're going to get you a second pair for school because growing kids always need backup shoes. And we're going to get you a new backpack because I noticed yours has a hole in it. And then if you're hungry, we're going to get some food because it's almost dinner time and I'm starving. Dante's eyes went so wide they looked like they might fall out of his head. Really? You mean it? But I don't want charity. I earned my money. This isn't charity, John interrupted gently. This is me saying thank you for being the kind of kid who gives me hope that the next generation is going to be better than this one. It's me saying I'm impressed by your work ethic and your integrity, and it's me saying that sometimes, when you do the right thing and work hard, good things happen. Not always, but sometimes. Is that okay? Dante looked at his saved money, then back at John, then at the crowd of people who were all watching this unfold with huge smiles on their faces. "Can I still use my money too? I want to pay for part of it. I earned it." John laughed, a genuine warm sound that made everyone around them smile. "Absolutely. Tell you what, you use your money for the first pair of shoes and I'll cover the rest. Deal?" Dante thought about it for a second, then nodded decisively. "Deal." He stuck out his hand for a handshake, formal and serious like they were making a business transaction. John shook his hand, matching his serious expression. "You drive a hard bargain, Dante. I respect that." Then he turned to the crowd, which showed no signs of dispersing. "Okay, everybody, show's over. We're going to go do some shopping, and I'm sure Dante would appreciate a little privacy." But before they could take more than 2 steps, a woman's voice cut through the crowd. Wait, please!" Everyone turned to see the older woman with the shopping bags pushing her way through the people. She was crying, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She walked right up to Dante and John, and for a moment she couldn't seem to find words. Finally, she said, "I'm so sorry. I saw what was happening and I was too scared to help. I just stood there. I've been thinking about it the whole time and I feel terrible." John started to respond, but Dante beat him to it. "It's okay," the boy said, his voice kind. "You're not as big as them. They might have hurt you. I understand." The woman knelt down, not caring that her knees cracked or that she was getting her dress dirty on the boardwalk. "No, honey, it's not okay. I should have done something. Said something. Called someone. I let fear make me useless, and that's not who I want to be." She looked up at John. "Thank you for being braver than I was." "Ma'am," John said gently, helping her back to her feet. "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when we could have done better. The important thing is that you recognize it now. Next time something like this happens, maybe you'll make a different choice." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Next time I will. I promise." She looked at Dante. "You're a remarkable young man. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than you are." Dante gave her a small smile. "Thank you, ma'am." As the woman walked away, several other people from the crowd came forward. A young man who admitted he'd walked past when the harassment started. A couple who'd told each other it wasn't their problem. A teenager who'd been too worried about getting in trouble to speak up. One by one, they apologized to Dante, thanked John, and promised to do better. It was like watching something shift in real time. The incident had started as an ugly example of the worst of humanity, but it was transforming into something else. A teaching moment. A reminder. A call to action that maybe, just maybe, would stick with people and change how they acted the next time they witnessed injustice. After the last of the apologizing bystanders had walked away, John looked down at Dante with a grin. "So, you ready to go get those shoes you've been dreaming about for 3 months?" Dante nodded so enthusiastically his whole body moved with it. "Yes, sir. I know exactly which store has them. It's just down the boardwalk, about 3 blocks from here. Lead the way." "My friend," John said, gesturing forward. As they started walking, it became immediately clear that their shopping trip wasn't going to be a quiet, private affair. The crowd followed at a respectful distance. People still recording on their phones, parents pointing John out to their kids, teenagers trying to work up the courage to ask for autographs. It was like being in a parade where only 2 people knew they were the main attraction. John noticed Dante glancing nervously at all the attention. "Gets a little overwhelming, doesn't it?" "How do you deal with this all the time?" Dante asked. "Don't you ever just want to go somewhere without everyone staring at you?" "That's why I was wearing the disguise earlier," John admitted with a laugh. "Sometimes you just want to be a regular person doing regular things. But you know what? If giving up some privacy means I can help good people when they need it, that's a trade I'm willing to make." They walked past street performers and souvenir shops, past families eating ice cream and couples taking selfies with the ocean in the background. The afternoon sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, painting everything in that golden hour light that makes California look like a postcard. Despite everything that had happened, it was still a beautiful day. When they reached the shoe store, Dante practically bounced through the door. A young sales associate looked up from arranging a display and did an immediate double take when he recognized John. His mouth fell open, and he just stood there for a second before remembering he was supposed to be working. Welcome. How can I help you today?" The associate was probably in his early 20s, with styling product in his hair and a name tag that read Kevin. We're here to get this young man some shoes, John said, putting his hand on Dante's shoulder. He's been saving up for 3 months and he knows exactly what he wants. Kevin seemed to snap into professional mode, though his hands were shaking slightly. Absolutely. What are we looking for today? Dante described the shoes in detail, the blue and white ones that all his classmates had, the ones that were good for basketball. Kevin nodded along, then his face fell slightly. Oh man, those are great shoes. Really popular, but I think we might be out of stock in most sizes. Let me check what we have. He disappeared into the back room and Dante's face crumbled with disappointment. After everything he'd been through today, after saving for so long, the possibility that they might not have his size was almost too much. His eyes started getting that shiny look again, like tears weren't far behind. Hey, John said softly. Don't worry yet. Let's see what he says. And if they don't have them here, we'll find another store that does. We're not leaving until you get those shoes, okay?